This week on Quality Digest Live, we examine artificial intelligence. Dirk, isn't that right? Artificial intelligence is either Skynet or salvation.
There you go. We'll be talking about that, plus how the Internet of Things could be returning us to the Middle Ages. Wow. That and more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is brought to you by Mitutoyo America. Whatever your metrology challenges, Mitutoyo supports you from start to finish.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for September 22nd, 2017. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
Yes, he is, and I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. Well, you know, 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from today, is Manufacturing Day.
That's right.
October 6, 2017. It's an annual event started 5 years ago by the National Association of Manufacturers to celebrate, hey, what else? U.S. manufacturing, right? Imagine that, Manufacturing Day. Now, of course, all of us here at QD and all of you in our audience know that successful manufacturing depends on accuracy and precision in test and measurement. You know those things that we consider quality, right? Quality manufacturing, okay. Well, as our small way of honoring the critical importance of the test and measurement functions within manufacturing today, we're launching a new live program during Manufacturing Day, Friday, October 6th. Again, we call it our Virtual Test and Measurement Expo, and we'll be preempting the show, Quality Digest Live, to broadcast this special event from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on that day. You can see it right there, Quality Digest Virtual Test and Measurement Expo. So, what can you expect from our virtual expo? Well, first of all, you're going to get a couple of really great demos, 3 of them in fact, from our sponsors, the LS Starrett Company and Faro Technologies. You're also going to get the chance to ask questions of Faro and Starrett application engineers to see how their equipment can help you with your particular measurement, test measurement challenges. On top of that, we're going to be bringing you interviews, we're planning this at least, hopefully this will come to pass, with thought leaders in the manufacturing world, as well as live drop-ins on Manufacturing Day events from across the country. So as you can see, I hope you can see, our Test and Measurement Expo is going to be an action-packed event that you're not going to want to miss. So mark your calendars now. Again, it's Friday, October 6th, 2 weeks from today, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, actually right now, pretty much, a couple minutes ago. And registration is required for this one. So you have to join in the fun by registering, and you can find the registration form. We'll have it actually down below the video player.
Yeah, it's not there right now, but we will have it.
We'll put it up on there after the show. Or keep your eye on your email inbox. We're going to be sending you information about the show here in the next couple of weeks. And you know, we've been taping some of these in advance. We taped one yesterday with Starrett. Really interesting demo. We don't want to give too much away, but really good demo you're going to have from Starrett on height gauge, I believe it was.
I know,
force gauge. I'm sorry, force gauge. Right. And yeah, that's going to be a good demo, and some other good demos on that show as well.
Right, and even though some of this is, some of the demos are pre-recorded, the interviews and so forth will be live. So what kind of the format is going to be for some of these is that you'll be able to see a demo that we did on a particular piece of equipment from Starrett or Faro, and then you'll be able to ask questions live. We'll have representatives from each of those companies either in the studio or joining us via Skype. So if you've got application questions related to that product, or I should say probably any product, if you're familiar with Starrett products or Faro products, feel free to join in. Send them questions. We'll answer those questions on the show. We could have application-oriented questions, or you might have specific technical questions related to the pieces of equipment that are being shown. So be sure to join us. And also, if we are fortunate enough, which we're pretty certainly are, to be able to line up some participants in Manufacturing Day across the United States. We hope to bring them in and just to hopefully support what these folks are doing to support manufacturing in the United States. So you want to join us for this.
That's right. It's going to be fun. So check it out. Again, October 6th, next 2 weeks from now. So check it out here right here at this time. Yeah, 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern.
There you go. Okay, so speaking of technical stuff, we enjoy covering technical content, like test and measurement equipment on this show. And quality initiatives run cutting edge technology. So it's only natural that we frequently talk about the Internet of Things, IoT, or sometimes the industrial IoT, IIoT, big data, cloud computing, and other forward-facing developments that affect our industry. And a big part of that, of course, involves automation, whether it's self-driving cars, one of my favorite topics, or robots on the shop floor. Or drones zipping around in the air, machines that can, to a certain extent, think, have become ubiquitous in our world. But are there dangers as well as opportunities in these increasingly smart machines? And that's the premise behind our own Ryan Day's recent op-ed, Artificial Intelligence, Salvation or Skynet. Anybody remember Skynet? You remember Skynet?
Of course, yeah.
Right.
Terminator, man.
And this appeared in yesterday's Thursday SIFT issue of Quality Digest newsletter. In this really well-researched article, Ryan offers a look at some of the hopes and fears and realities of AI, of artificial intelligence, with references to the perspectives and opinions of thought leaders like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Steve Mnuchin. Well, some of these guys are thought leaders at least.
But don't get political, Dirk. Why are you always doing that?
Right, exactly. The bottom line is that AI has the potential to greatly improve productivity and relieve the drudgery that's still found in manufacturing facilities around the world. And that's the salvation part of Ryan's headline. As for the Skynet part, well, does the phrase, "I'll be back," mean anything to you?
Yeah.
No, seriously, Mike.
Yes, that's right.
There isn't actually any fear that machines will one day gain consciousness, maybe, start replicating and upgrading themselves, and ultimately wipe out humanity.
There's no fear of that.
There's no fear of that. Some people are afraid of that.
Some people are afraid of that.
Including some thought leaders.
Yeah, there are.
There was actually a great interview on NPR the other day about that AI is getting so good that some people who work in the AI industry are worried that in 15, 20 years, AI will have advanced to the point where if we aren't putting, let's say, protections in place now, we could have this a chance where artificial intelligence may accidentally do something that is unintended, because if it has the ability to write its own code, which some AI is doing right now, in other words, to make its own modifications to its own software, which is something that's being looked at, by the way. That's part of what's going on with self-driving cars, by the way, is they're self-learning as well. If that gets to the point where it runs uncontrolled, might artificial intelligence do something unexpected and actually cause harm?
Well, yeah, and that's the Skynet part of that. Is if you remember watching Terminator, where the machines gained consciousness and basically started eradicating humanity. I mean, that's yeah. I mean,
pesky humans.
But I mean, it's like you're not value added, so you get out of here.
Sorry, you gotta go.
I mean, I think that there are some legitimate concerns. Some of these are pretty overblown, but there's some legitimate concerns about what happens when we lose control of this, and if we lose control of it, and what happens when these machines begin to make decisions on their own for things. And it's not so much that it's this great disaster maybe, but it just things may happen, decisions may be made in an industrial setting that you didn't plan for.
Well, there's a good example of this. Yeah. There's a really good example of this. Remember that big stock market crash we had a few years ago, where automated trading, it did something that nobody
expected it to do,
and all of a sudden it was like selling off all the stock because of something that nobody intended. Now they have circuit breakers and so forth in place.
We learned from that.
We learned from that. But that was an example of essentially artificial intelligence doing something that we did not anticipate.
But the thing is, machines will learn faster than us.
Yes.
So I mean, machine learned how to what it thought do what it was programmed to do. I thought, use the word thought, but it did what it was programmed to do. We didn't think through all the parameters of that, and actually, the relentlessly logical. This is the fear for me. The relentlessly logical progression of machine intelligence doesn't take into account things like, well, if that happened, who would want that to happen? We wouldn't do that, right?
Right. A human wouldn't do that.
A human wouldn't do that. And actually, it's interesting you talk about the self-driving car part of that, because when I was at Hexagon Live this summer in Vegas, they talked about this a lot, this idea that there's so much data that comes out of a self-driving, an automated car environment.
Right.
And yeah, it is self-learning. It has to be. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about a human being driving down a road, all the decisions that are just made,
Right.
automatically, that
Right.
you don't even think about.
Right.
But have to be thought about in advance and programmed into the machine, and can the machine then learn to figure that out on their own
Right.
as it goes? Like, for instance, the example they use is a dark tunnel.
Okay.
Like, for instance, right now, when you're going through a dark tunnel, they can't figure out a way to program a car to keep going.
Oh, right.
It just stops, right? Because there's nothing to see.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So if it can't perceive anything, now you and I, our minds know, well, the road's there.
Right.
We're going to have light in a couple of seconds, so we'll just keep going.
Right, right.
But the machine doesn't know how to do that. They can't figure out how to program the machine to do that
Okay,
yet.
interesting. Yeah.
But they will at some
will,
point.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, this whole idea about the chain reactions and what happens when consciousness, that's a whole other issue.
Right,
I mean,
right.
we've had this argument ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't believe there ever will be truly machine consciousness.
Yeah.
As we know it.
As we know it. As we know it.
I mean,
but I did want to. I wanted to. So we can bring this down to kind of a manufacturing perspective as well. Is one of the things that we are working with a lot. Industry's working with a lot is cobots. Robots that work alongside people. And to a certain extent, they're also self-learning robots. In other words, one of the things we talked about, it was a couple years ago, some experiments that are being done by MIT, where the robot is watching the human and learning from the human and adapting its own motions so that it stays out of the way of the human or modifies the human. And this was the interesting bit, and I don't know if anybody remembers me talking about this. The next step was, can the robot teach the human? In other words, if the robot detects that the human is making
wasted motion,
making wasted motion, can it in some way or another nudge the human into making a more value-adding motion, or take away the non-value-adding motion. And it might do that simply by blocking the human.
Mm-hmm.
It might do that by maybe speaking to the human, saying, hey, try doing this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part they haven't figured out, is how does the robot teach the human?
Right.
But that's kind of that next step. And this isn't science fiction. I mean, this is being worked on in industrial environments right now.
Yeah, where people and robots work together. And the same thing again with all self-driving cars, where it's like right now the idea is that you'd have self-driving car lanes and you'd have human lanes. They'd be separated.
Right.
Because the cars have a difficult time figuring out what the unpredictable humans will do.
Right.
That's the biggest issue, is there's so many weird decisions that human drivers make, obviously, especially here in California.
Although there was there was a good video. One more minute.
Yeah.
There is a good video. Oh man, I'm not sure even how you would Google it, but a self-driving car in Europe that detected an accident in front of the car that it was behind, because they have radar that skips underneath the car in front.
Okay.
And the guy, there was a dash cam going on, right? So the car actually, you see the self-driving car actually start to brake before you see the brake lights come on in the car in front of it.
How interesting.
And that was because the car ahead of it had, I don't know, braked suddenly or spun out or something, and the self-driving car actually saw ahead and actually started an evasive maneuver while braking before anybody else even knew it was happening. So, I mean, there is a lot of advantages to this. I mean, it shouldn't, and even including detecting unexpected actions from a human driver. So
amazing,
yeah,
great
cool
stuff. All right, thanks,
Talk
Rick.
about this all day.
Well,
We
we almost did. Well, but it's all right, because we're actually going to talk about something similar now as well. Again, technology and how it relates to humanity as well. And I'm a history buff. I think many of you who watch the show will know that, and I may have said it once or twice on the show in the past too. I like history. But be that as it may, this next article poses an interesting historical analogy that had never actually occurred to me before, never contemplated before. Is the Internet of Things sending us back to the Middle Ages, is the name of the piece, and it was written by Joshua Fairfield, and Professor Fairfield is a law professor at Washington and Lee University. The article first appeared on the Conversation website, and we republished it in yesterday's Thursday SIFT issue of a newsletter. And as I say, Professor Fairfield makes I think a rather unique and I think extremely compelling argument here in his article, namely that the system of private ownership of things like tools, is the example he uses, which is really held in place for several centuries now, may be in the process of being subverted by the standard operating procedures inherent to IoT, Internet of Things. Worse, many of us are not even aware of that subversion.
Okay.
Let me explain what he's talking about here. If you think about it, you think about the state of society during the Middle Ages, one thing that stands out is that pretty much no one owned anything. Okay. Or to be more precise, a tiny handful of royals owned everything, right? I mean, to be a peasant in say 1200 AD meant that you literally owned nothing. You didn't own the food you ate, you didn't own the pots you cooked it in, you didn't own the utensils you used to eat it, you didn't own the dwelling on which you lived, you didn't own the land on which the dwelling sat. Nothing. Everything was essentially leased to you, and that was your lot in life. You were a leaseholder for everything. You didn't own anything. Yeah. And nobody really cared about it. You know, there wasn't this idea that any one single person would own anything.
Right.
That's for the kings, right?
Right.
Or at least for the dukes or whatever. Well, fast forward 800 or so years, and we see this state of affairs kind of returning a little bit through the increasing prevalence of IoT devices. I mean, the things that make those devices function, their software, are generally not yours. I mean, you may own the couple of ounces of plastics and metals that make up the smartphone, but the apps that make it do what it does belong to the software companies, right?
And they can make changes or pull them or
and
whatever they want.
And that's exactly the point that Professor Fairfield is talking about. They can choose what they want to do with those apps. I mean, if they want to install backdoor pieces of code to allow them to track your movements, identify your habits, or delineate your buying preferences, let's say, those software companies can pretty much do that if they want, right? I mean, that's the price we pay for getting access to all these amazing features and benefits that we get from the apps on these smart devices. So, I mean, is that it? Is that the end of the story, right? Is that just what we have to put up with? Right. Well, not necessarily. Fairfield talks about the right to repair legislation that's kind of slowly returning some actual ownership to device owners. But companies like Apple, I mean, understandably, they're fighting very hard against that. I mean, like net neutrality, which is another big issue of huge importance. I mean, it's being waged now kind of in the shadows a little bit. A handful of activists and lawyers are really aware of it, but most of us, you know, day to day, going about our day-to-day world, aren't really aware of what's going on with this stuff. The resolution of these kind of issues are going to go a long way toward deciding if today's most advanced technology is going to function kind of as a time machine, right? Returning us all into a collection of digital serfs. I mean, that was Fairfield's take on it. And he makes a really fair point here. You know, I mean, the right to repair is become kind of a rallying cry now, because like the other example he uses in that article are like harvesters and tractors.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that was a good example. Yeah, that was
you can't repair them. You know, I mean, the average self-reliant farmer would buy a tractor from an international harvester or whatever, and he'd own it for his life, and he or she, and they would fix it or add to it, do whatever.
Right. And I believe in that case, this was a $250,000, $250,000 harvester. And if for those of you who don't live in the Midwest or haven't been out there, harvesters and combines and stuff, they are complete. I mean, they can be completely high tech and completely self-running. I mean, I've been told that a harvester could be set up to actually use GPS data and actually drive itself and harvest an entire field. I mean, they're very software intensive. And in this particular case, a guy wanted to make some sort of repair, some sort of change, and I can't remember whether it was John Deere or International Harvester said, no, you can't do that. I think it was John Deere,
yeah, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
We own that.
We own it.
Yeah.
He paid $250,000 for it, but they own it. So obviously this went to court.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how that was resolved. Actually.
I don't think it has been
resolved yet. Yeah. And this is the issue here. Right. Is like what is your right as an or are you an owner? Are you an owner or are you a leaseholder of that stuff?
Right.
And like I say, it's from as small as a smartphone in your pocket up to these huge harvesters that are in the fields in the Midwest and all over the world. It's a really interesting issue. I mean, it's not one that I really thought about. And the analogy you used of kind of going back to the Middle Ages with it is really a fascinating one, because that was exactly the way it was. You know, if you were 90%, 95, whatever percentage of the populace in Europe, especially, you just did what you were told and you used what you were given, and you didn't own it. You couldn't do anything with it other than just use it.
Yeah.
And if the owner of that stuff wanted you not to use it anymore, well, you were SOL, you know.
Well, and by the way, this was a few years ago, but I think it still happens. when Apple first opened up its Apple Store, apps for iPhones and that sort of stuff, there were at one point a bunch of apps just disappeared because Apple decided that they didn't want those apps for whatever reason, and who knows what it was, but they simply disappeared off your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd gotten the apps, you may have paid for the apps,
Sure.
but Apple doesn't want them in their store anymore. They don't want them in their phones, and so they go away.
I
It's
mean,
like, wait a minute.
And they disappeared like just immediately.
disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even like you had to bring it in and have it modified and say, hey, we're going to make a change. It was like
they're no longer there.
The updates. Yeah.
And Android has done that in certain cases as well. So again, you may have the phone in your pocket. You may outright have bought the phone.
Sure.
But it's not yours.
No. Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, the phone, yes, is yours. Like I say, that hunk of metal and plastic is yours. But what makes it do its thing is not yours.
It's not yours, right?
Really good argument. Check that one out by Professor Fairfield, Joshua Fairfield. Really good piece there. All right, well, Dirk, we're going to turn to our tech corner now. We've had tech corners from the X-Rite folks here in the past, and we have another one now. This is their Color Eye system. It's a calibrating system. Of course, they're a color company, X-Rite, and we're going to check it out now. So, Dirk, take it away.
Okay, Mike, thanks. Well, this has to be probably the least techie tech corner we've ever had. I mean, normally we've got electronical stuff and lasers and lights and flashing buttons and all that sort of stuff. Today, we have a little cardboard card in the sleeve here, about the size of a credit card, and that's it. This is the X-Rite Color Eye, but it's deceiving because this thing is really cool, and I'll tell you what the problem is here that they're addressing. So, if you've ever done any DIY, home decorating, or maybe you have a spouse who is a home interior designer, and you need to match a color. So let's say you have a brand new couch, and you want to match, the paint on the wall, and the lampshades and accessories. You want to match them. Now, if you're lucky enough, you've got like maybe a fabric swatch, or maybe you can take an entire cushion, maybe run it down to Home Depot and start pulling paint swatches off the paint rack there and trying to find a matching color. And then maybe you can go down to the lampshade aisle and hold your couch up to different color lampshades and try to match it. And that's all well and good if you actually have something that you can take to the store. Suppose it's too big to take to the store. Or suppose you're doing your shopping online. And this is really where this product comes in. Anybody who has shopped for some sort of color object online and expected to get in Amazon, open the box and pull out something that looked like the color that you saw online, you know that most of the time you are grossly disappointed, because the color you see on your browser or your mobile app is rarely the color of the actual object, just because of differences in cameras, differences in browsers, differences in the software that makes the website. Colors can be all over the place, and this is what this product addresses. And I'll show you how it works. If we come over here to the gauge cam. So what we have here is simply a printed card. It's got all sorts of color swatches on there, and it's got also some that are reflective. You can see in the middle there kind of these ones that are reflecty. And when these are printed, X-Rite also runs them through a spectrophotometer and measures each of these colors, because a printing process itself is not accurate. So they can remeasure this, and then they can calibrate the card and store that calibration information on this 2D barcode, on a 2D code on the back of the card. This, coupled with your smartphone, will calibrate the smartphone and turn your smartphone into an accurate color measuring device. So how would you use this? Well, let's step through it. So first of all, I would open up my app on my smartphone. This happens to be an iPhone 7 right here. Thanks to Chris Smith for loaning us this. So we'll measure the 2D code. It immediately, as soon as it came into view, it checked the box, said everything was okay. Now we're ready to start measuring. So let's flip this card over. And all we have to do now is line the card up in the little box there. It'll take a picture with flash, and it will take a picture without flash. And it will do its little crunching in the background there. And we come up with the match. So this is a match for the shirt. Now, in the standalone Color Eye app, what I can do is I can go through and I can pick out, say, a paint brand. So I got a number of Behr, we got some Benjamin Moore, let's see, Sherwin-Williams. We also have some fashion designer and cosmetics companies in here, but I'm just going to pick a bare paint color. So this gives me the bare paint color right here that is the closest match to this piece of fabric. So now I just order this paint color. I could go down to Home Depot and pick out that paint, and I would know that it matches. Let me show this once again. Let's use something a little bit different color. We're going to measure this kind of semi-shiny piece of plastic here. We're going to do that again. And same thing. Goes in there, takes a picture with flash, takes a picture without flash, and comes up and gives me my match. Now, this is a standalone app. It's kind of for demo purposes only, and I'll get to how the app would really work for a vendor. But notice that it's not only just giving me the best matches, it's also giving me the complement. If you're a color designer, a lot of times what you're looking for is complementary colors. You're looking for things called triadics. These are all color combinations that look good together, either because they're contrasty or because they're similar. Near neighbors, far neighbors. These are all, if you're a color designer, you're familiar with these. So it not only gives you the match, it also gives you the colors that work well with it. Now, how would you actually use this? Well, as a vendor, what's going to happen is the vendors are going to work with X-Rite. We come back to the wide shot here. The vendors are going to work with X-Rite to integrate the Color Eye into their online mobile apps. So let's say we have Daisy's Decor store, right? So Daisy Decor would have an app, a mobile app, and in that app, the Color Eye would be embedded. The software would be embedded just like we saw here. So with your mobile phone, you might go out to Daisy's Decor and you would bring up the app, and part of that app might be color matching, right? And so you would do the same thing that I just showed you here, except it's built into her app. And what would happen is once it did that color matching, it would show you everything in her store that matched that color. So it might show you all of her fabrics that match, all of the paints that match, lampshades, all the accessories. Everything in her store that matched that color could then show up. Now, what's this do? This means that you can order from Daisy's Decor and know that the color you get is going to match the color that you sent them, because that's already been handled by the phone and what's going on at Daisy's Decor. Now, this means that Daisy's Decor is going to get fewer returns because of bad color matches. It's also going to draw more customers because people know that they can trust something they get from Daisy's Decor as opposed to Frank's Fashion Expalooza that doesn't do that sort of thing. So they know that they can trust that. Now, in order for this to work, there's a couple things that are necessary. First of all, the store itself has to have all of their products measured. Now, sometimes some of the stuff, some manufacturers of colors or products that have color have that information available for the vendor. But if they don't, there's a lot of tools out there. X-Rite makes a tool called the Capture. It's like a $650 color measurement tool. And as part of inventory, you could be measuring these products as they come in, storing that color information in the online store. And over time, you would build up this database of colors. That's on the vendor side. On the client side and the customer side, there's only certain phones that this works with right now. So currently the Color Eye is supported by the iPhone SE, the S6, S6 Plus, 7 Plus, the Android Nexus 5, and the Samsung Galaxy S6, S6 Edge, S7, S7 Edge, S7 Active. And there are also more devices that are being rolled out. So as long as you have one of those phones, you can do this right now. Now, this product isn't fully rolled out. X-Rite is currently working with 50 or more vendors right now to integrate this into their online stores and their offerings. And then for the customer, all that would happen is you would go to that store, whether it's a brick and mortar store, they might be handing out these cards or selling them for a few bucks. Literally a couple bucks, $2 or $3, or just cardboard, right? Or you might be able to order them from an online store. But once you had it, it's always going to work, right? It's going to work for any store. It's just a calibration card with the calibration information stored on it. So again, I think this is a fantastic product for consumers and for vendors, just to tighten that relationship, particularly with online buying. So if you're interested in this, it's called the X-Rite Color Eye, Color-I. be sure to put the dash in there. There is another Color Eye product by X-Rite, which isn't this one. And we also have a link to it out underneath our player page. You can go out there and get information from it. And if you want to get a demo of this, I suggest you contact X-Rite and see if they can set you up. It really is a fascinating product. And thanks again for the folks at X-Rite working with me on this. There's a lot of information I had to switch back and forth with them in order to understand the product fully. So appreciate it, guys. Thanks. And Mike, back to you.
All right, there you have it. Thank you, Dirk. That is, again, X-Rite's Color Eye, Color-I, COLOR-EYE,
Yeah.
Color Eye.
Yeah, it says Color Eye right there, but there is actually a dash in it.
There's a dash in there, that's right. All right, thanks, Dirk. Great Tech Corner. All right, well, that's our show for this week, but before we go, of course, we want to thank our sponsor. Mitutoyo Corporation is the world's largest provider of measurement and inspection solutions, offering the most complete selection of machines, sensors, systems, and services with a line encompassing CMMs, vision, form, and finish measuring machines, as well as precision tools and instruments, and metrology data management software. Mitutoyo's nationwide network of metrology centers and support operations provides application, calibration, service repair, and educational programs to ensure that their more than 6,000 metrology products will deliver measurement solutions for their customers. For more information, visit www.mitutoyo.com or click on the banner ad just below or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's right, and that is the end of our show. And thanks again to X-Rite for providing their Color Eye to us for today's Tech Corner.
That's right.
Oh, and we have an interesting webinar coming up for you next week, sponsored by certification body SGS. The presentation is titled How Risk-Based Thinking Flows Through ISO 9001:2015 to Drive a Faster, Better Organization. It will be presented by SGS training instructor Peter Merrill and hosted by me.
You, right there.
The webinar happens Wednesday, September 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So mark your calendars now. Note that slightly different time, 10 a.m. as opposed to 11 a.m. So mark your calendars today.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. A lot of you have already registered for that. So,
Yep.
so make
Got a
sure
lot
you
of attendees.
check that one out. Yep. So that's it. That's our show for the week. Thank you again for joining us. Again, thanks to X-Rite for being there and giving us a great Tech Corner. Thank you, Dirk, for being there.
Yep.
And
There
thank
we
you
go.
all for being there, too. Have a great weekend.
So long.
We'll see you next week. Bye.